Oh, man, this is harsh. We can't see anybody up here. How y'all doing? Yes. Yes. Man, it is so good to be back home. You know, when I moved out here with my wife, we were newlyweds. Came out here in 2004. And we were acting a fool and having fun and doing all types of stuff. We came to a little city that marketed itself as keeping themselves weird. And as we joined Inner Light Ministries in 2005, we found a place of home that grounded us, that allowed us to fly. And so it is really good to be back home. I thank Wallace for his beautiful words earlier and the song that just kind of grounded me. I was floating back there, and I was like, wait, I got to get up and talk now? But I also want to thank Richard for reaching out to me and making this happen. So it's interesting because upon coming home, as I define it, I was really hoping that I can say some words that would be very articulate and inspiring. But to be honest with you, as I think about the impending inauguration, there's often times that I feel consumed by feelings of consternation and confusion. My mental plate seems loaded with these heaping dollops of disbelief and disappointment and dismay. There's this general sense that I can't believe that this is happening. Are we in some alternative timeline? Or is this like some what-if scenario gone bad, a la Christmas Carol? Are we trapped in some never-ending reality TV moment? Y'all know that feeling? There's this sense of disbelief that is also accompanied by this sense of sadness. And a question, not in our head, but in our heart, is this the country that we live in? I remember the night of the election very clearly. Kawami, my partner, she was up in Seattle at a conference, and I was at home with my 9-year-old daughter. Her name is Niara. This was going to be the first election that she would be able to remember. She grew up in the age of Obama. And in fact, she turned 1 year old on November 4th, 2008, which is the same day that Barack Obama became president. Yeah. And I held that precious daughter in my arms as the polls closed on the West Coast. And Rachel Maddow said, we can now say that Barack Obama will be the 44th president of the United States. And it wasn't as dramatic as that, you know, that root scene where you lift the child up to the stars, right? It wasn't that dramatic, but I held my daughter in my arms and I spoke to her. And I said with a degree of certainty and joy, the world in which you live in will be quite different than the world in which I or those who came before me will live. Yours is a world of infinite possibility. And so this past election night, I was prepared to reenact that scene. But instead of holding my baby in my arms, I was able to hold my young daughter by the hand. And she didn't know too much about all the election. It wasn't a good campaign to start rolling out a civics lessons. Wasn't the one. But she knew enough to know that in her concept, Hillary Clinton was Barack Obama's friend. And it kind of made sense. And we were ready, my wife and I, we were ready to embrace this girl power moment and this narrative that we've been encouraging her and building into her ever since she was a baby. It brought me great sadness to have to send my daughter off to bed when the election results were in flux. It brought me great sadness to hear her say in a mumbled, tired tone, going to bed, but please don't wake me up and tell me that Trump won. It brought me great sadness when that which seemed impossible became inevitable, as Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania came in. And at first, I was angry. I couldn't believe that this was happening. Burn it all down, I said. Good, let them get what they deserve, I said. I was angry and perplexed, and I sent out some texts to Rev D. I was trying to make sense of it all. And the thing that hurt me the most is that I didn't know what I was going to tell my sleeping child. I didn't know how I was going to tell her that, you know what, baby, even though we tried to give you morals, sometimes it's just so that people who use mean words and people who bully and people who make fun of people reap rewards. I didn't know what to tell my daughter who was asleep in the other room. For me, it was that quintessential midnight hour moment. Those who are familiar with the Black religious tradition know about the midnight hour. It is this time when things seem the bleakest, when things seem the darkest. Dr. King, who we talked about earlier, who we celebrated this week, he knew about the midnight hour moment. He wasn't a stranger to it. In fact, when he was a young activist going off to Montgomery, he was awakened in his sleep by what he described as a nasty phone call. It was a death threat. Somebody who said, I'm gonna blow your head off, and there was some N-words that I'm not gonna speak tonight. And I'm gonna kill your family too. And at this point, he wasn't a stranger to these types of threats. But he said that particular night, and that particular threat from that, as he said, an ugly voice, moved him to the core. Maybe it had something to do with the fact that they had their first child, a little baby girl who was sleeping in a crib on the side of the bed. But he couldn't go back to sleep. So he went downstairs and he went into the kitchen. And as the story says, he fixed some strong coffee for himself. King said that he got to the point that he couldn't take it any longer, that he was weak. And it moved him in such a way that he moved into his midnight hour, and quite literally the midnight hours. King said that he bowed down over that cup of coffee and he prayed a prayer out loud that night. He said, Lord, I am here trying to do what is right. I think I know what I'm doing is right. And I think the cause that we represent and are fighting for is right. But Lord, I must confess that I am weak now. I am faltering and I'm losing my courage. How many people out there can identify with that? Feeling of weakness, losing my courage. And so what happened next? King says that it seemed at that moment he can hear this inner voice rising up inside of him. And it said, Martin Luther, stand up for righteousness. Martin Luther, stand up for justice. Martin Luther, stand up for truth. And lo, I will be with you even until the end of the world. That's what he heard. And that's what he felt in his heart. And it awakened something new within him. You see, the midnight hour moment in the kitchen over some strong coffee that happened before Selma, before the March on Washington, before the Nobel Peace Prize, before the signing of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, before his prophetic stands against the Vietnam War and his advocacy for economic justice, before all that, there was this moment of profound doubt and disappointment and dismay. And yet, he was able to tap into this higher reality that was greater than the reality of his circumstances. He was able to be empowered by the substance of things hoped for that energized him to connect to a vision of possibility that may or may not have matched the facts of his circumstances. It was beyond what he can even see. He was able to feel at one with the source of all life and all strength, and that allowed him to carry on. King became king because he connected to one little word, something that I think we need more than ever tonight. That word is hope. Hope. Now, for some, this is a matter of faith, and they articulate what hope means in religious and spiritual words and with spiritual resources. Others choose not to conceptualize it in that way, but regardless, I can say that hope is not a passive thing. It is very powerful. I know this today because I stand as a manifestation of the prayers that my ancestors prayed centuries ago. I stand here today as a testament to my ancestors who, in this very country, faced the unspeakable horrors inflicted upon them during the institution of slavery and beyond, and still, they held on. And they remained rooted in a hope that not only allowed them to resist, but to imagine a future of freedom and flourishing for the generations that were to come. I am a living embodiment of their hope. And to be honest, as I sat in front of CNN or MSNBC, I felt my ancestors begin to rile within me and nudge me out of my chair. I felt moved to rise from that place that I was sitting there in despair. I felt my ancestors bidding me to turn off the TV and follow them into my daughter's room, where there, my precious daughter slept in what appeared at the moment in an uncanny innocence. And I no longer had the question within me, what am I going to tell her? Because things began to get a little bit clear. Not easier, just clearer. And as I looked at my daughter, I heard the witness of my ancestors ask me, do you think that you are the first generation of folk who had to face some adversity? Do you think that you should be exempt from the struggle? You, a child of hope, do you think that you get to opt out just because things didn't go your way? Do you not think that the same strength that empowered King and others who struggled for the better world is not able to rise up and meet the challenges of today? And as I saw my daughter sleeping there, her little chest rising up and down, I heard something inside of me that said, Mahsea, you need to rise up. You need to step up. And if you cannot do it for you, then do it for her. And do it for all the children who will come up after you. You see, many of us who believe in progressive values for this country are experiencing their midnight hour moment. We who believe that healthcare is a right and not subject to the whims of politicians. We who care about the plight of the immigrant family who is fearful of deportation or exploitation. We who care about our Muslim sisters and brothers and hope for them to be able to live freely, free from discrimination or being stereotyped or targeted. We who care about the rights of those in the LGBTQ community and ensuring that the dignity of all people are honored. We who believe that Black lives do in fact matter and that we can create communities of safety and care so that all of our children can dream big dreams. Many of us are in our midnight hour moment. But in the same way that King tapped into a sense of hope at his kitchen table over some strong coffee, in the same way that our ancestors tapped into hope while plotting to steal away up north, in the same way that freedom fighters tapped into hope like Chavez or Dolores Huerta or John Lewis, I know that today, we can tap into that same hope as we get ready to resist and fight and struggle for a world that works for all people. But the question is, are y'all ready? I remember hearing about the words of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who said, the march from Selma to Montgomery was about protest and prayer. Legs are not lips and walking is not kneeling, and yet our legs uttered songs. Even without words, our march was worship. I felt my legs were praying. This moment demands for us to get moving. And when we move, we can be connected to a hope that is empowering and that enables us to face the challenges of this new Trump era with new vigor and strength. And we're going to need it. And we're going to need to access these inner resources because it's not going to be a cakewalk. You know, when I sat by my daughter's bedside, as I said, things got clearer, but I didn't say that things got easier because I still get angry. I'm still at times fearful. And in many ways, this election felt like a repudiation of everything that Obama represented. It's hard not to take that personal, especially when I reflect so much of what he embodies. And this notion of taking back our country or making America great again feels like a turning back of the clocks on so many hard-fought battles. It hurts because it feels like the wrong values won out. I can hear my grandmama say, "Why does the wicked prosper?" That's what she was saying. But despite the anger, hope allows us not to fall into the trap of other risings of those we disagree with. Hope allows us not to polarize ourselves around our differences or objectify those who are on the other side of the aisle. It is true what Rev D says, that the consciousness that obtains, what? Sustains. And if we fight using what Audre Lorde calls the master's tools, or the consciousness that got us here, then we are doomed as a people to fall into endless cycles where we simply change seats at the table while still playing the same game. But hope calls us to flip the script, or to do what Jesus did in his revolutionary moment, to literally flip tables, and to completely transform the paradigm from which we are operating from. This is the revolutionary of values that King spoke of. To imagine and fight for a vision that is big enough to include even those we disagree with and those we don't like and those who we perceive as enemies. Hope allows us to turn away from this present system and pursue the realization of the beloved community. To make real Cornel West's words, who said that justice is what love looks like in public. Hope allows us to keep on keeping on even when it gets hard. So my question tonight for you is, are y'all ready? Yes. Are y'all ready? Yes. But here's the thing, y'all. There's truth in Gandhi's words that you need to be the change that you want to see. And I'm paraphrasing. Because this revolution that we're talking about needs authenticity. Meaning, we cannot talk about engaging those in red states if we're not willing to talk to the family members in the next room. Meaning, we cannot talk about desiring peace in Israel-Palestine if we're not willing to work for peace in our own communities. This revolution of values and this hope that I speak of is not some abstraction. It is real. And to the extent that we are able to embody them in our own lives, in our own communities, we will have the integrity and the strength to project that energy out into the country that is so much in need of that healing. This is what I know. So I'm getting ready to close, and I'm laughing because Rev D, they said, never trust a black preacher who says they're getting ready to close. But I am. About a month ago, I had a meeting with U.S. Congressman Ami Bera in my office. We were going over the last minute details of a town hall that I was hosting with some of the interfaith leaders in Sacramento. And let me tell you, many of the politicians in Washington are struggling with this issue as we are. I mean, they know how to pass legislation, they know how to push policy and politic and do all that, but they are looking for a way forward in the same way that we are. We tonight have this incredible opportunity because beyond the political goal of passing a certain policy agenda or retaking the House or the Senate or the presidency, there's an opportunity to push for a revolution of values where all truly means all, where justice reigns, and everyone has the ability to live out the fullness of who they are without any impediments. I know this is not an easy time. Midnight hour moments never are. And this is a time that is breeding, again, great consternation, confusion, and concern. And there are times when you will indeed get weary. There are times when you think that your work is in vain. But trust me tonight, there is a power available to all of you within that can revive your soul again. And I find great hope in Howard Thurman's words that the contradictions of this life are never final. That there's a unity of life that is greater than the pendulum swings of the moment. That there is an innate love and wholeness and beauty that wants to emerge through this world, through this country, through our politics, through our communities, and through our very lives. And I see that beauty all around, including in all of you tonight. Those who've braved these elements, those for some crazy reason keep insisting that your state is, meaning this city is weird, and you want to keep it that way. I see that beauty. You know what? Can you turn up the lights a little bit? I want you to kind of look around to each other. Because I see that beauty when you realize that you're going to have to lean on each other. You're going to have to encourage each other. You're going to have to support each other. You're going to have to love on each other during these moments. More than ever. And lastly, you know what? I see that beauty when I see the irrepressibility of life that is evident in my daughter, Niara. Thich Nhat Hanh said, because you are alive, all things are possible. And when I see my daughter, I see her life. I see the infinite possibilities. I see her love, I see her creativity, I see her ingenuity, I see her passion, I see her smile. And I'm reminded of that bedside moment, and I hear it again. If I can't do it for myself, do it for her. And do it for all of our children who are going to come after us. And it's then I'm able to tap into a hope once again, even in the age of Trump, and steel myself for the work that needs to be done in order to midwife a world that is worthy for her and all of our children, and yea, even for ourselves, and yes, for the ancestors that preceded us. I'll close with this quote. Begins, hope is not blind optimism. It is not ignoring the enormity of the task ahead or the roadblocks that stand in our path. It is not sitting on the sidelines or shirking from the fight. Hope is that thing inside of us that insists, despite all evidence to the contrary, that something better awaits for us if we are willing to have the courage to reach for it and to work for it and to fight for it. Hope is the belief that destiny will not be written for us, but by us, by the women and men who are not content to settle for the world as it is and who have the courage to remake the world as it should be. Those words spoken by our current president, Barack Obama, about the audacity of hope is probably more meaningful now than when he first uttered them. So the question I have for you is, are y'all ready? No, but are y'all ready? Yes. Are y'all ready? Yes. Because now more than ever is a time to pick up the baton and truly make the promise of hope real in our world today. Thank you so much. Blessings to you, Cruz.